had the 1930s. Inflation from then to now, if you had $1 billion then, it would be worth $12 billion now. And for example, like a Firestone tire back in the 30s was $3.69. Now, if you get like kind of the better ones, the more expensive ones, it's $205. Steak, a pound of steak is 20 cents. Now, if you get like a good sirloin or like all that, it's almost $10. Road King car, $685. Now, the same car now is worth $25.
$25.
Single vision glasses is like your glasses, but there's only like one lens. It's $3.85. Now it could go anywhere from $700.
Wait, there's only one lens in your glass?
Yeah.
It just means they're not bifocals.
Yeah, it means like
just regular glasses.
Yeah. Some events that happened during the 30s. The Great Depression happened. 31, the worst drought in history, started the Dust Bowl. 32, military hard flies over the Atlantic Ocean. 33, 21st Amendment passed, ends prohibition. 34, Disney introduces Donald Duck. 35, River Dam is completed. 36, Jesse Owens wins 4 gold medals at Berlin Olympics. 37, Memorial Day Massacre takes place in Chicago. 38, Germany begins persecution of Jews. 39, Germany attacks Poland, starting World War II. This is just some fashion and clothes, and you can see like how expensive the items are. It's pretty cheap. And then some sports changes that were then. National Baseball Hall of Fame starts with the first players to be chosen: Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Walter Johnson, Christy Matthew, and Babe Ruth. To help with the flying tennis due to depression, night games are started. Basketball, National Collegiate or NCAA holds first championship tourney in 1939, which Oregon won. And American football, goalposts were moved from the back of the end zone to the front of the end zone. NFL championship game introduced between Eastern and Western divisions, and the NFL draft was introduced. So inventions: ballpoint pen, electric razor, sticky tape, Polaroid, jet engine, and nylon. And then this is my source.
When we think about, you can sit down. When we think about eras in history, there is not always a single event or a single day that represents, okay, now we're moving on to a new historical period, right? Sometimes events do mark the beginning. So when we talk about the 1930s, we really are starting before the 1930s at the end of the Roaring 20s. So tell me what you know about the Roaring 20s.
It was like...
This is like Gatsby time.
It was
period.
like booming.
Okay, it was a huge economic boom. Everybody had money. There were lots of jobs. There was lots of... What else?
Drugs, sex, prostitution.
Parties, sex, beer.
Whoa,
Prostitution.
I don't know, maybe.
So I think you said
Some of the other
Sex.
people like Al Capone, gangsters,
Mobs.
the mob,
He's
the
part of the mob.
American mafia.
Monopoly.
Those things rose. Monopolies, because businesses were really booming and they could buy other businesses. And then, what happens? What happens to end that?
Oh, the stock market goes...
Stock market crashes. So people had invested all this money, the stock market crashes, which set off a ripple effect.
Yep.
And so what happened during the next
Great
10
Depression.
years or so?
It was
Actually,
just a
it was
big
really
old
like
drought.
7 years.
It was a big old drought. The Dust Bowl.
Okay, ironically, the stock market crash, which had nothing to do with the weather,
affected the weather.
right after that, the worst drought in U.S. history, well, second worst, I think the one recently was worse, but people were unprepared. So how were people unprepared for the Dust Bowl?
They were growing the same
Who
crops.
has the Dust Bowl?
Me.
They were
Okay.
growing the same crop every year, and it was ruining the soil. So it was
Okay, they
ruining
didn't
the
know very
topsoil.
much about crop rotation and how to manage the soil. So there were a lot of factors that contributed to it. So the 1930s, if we think of the 1920s as this party, fancy dresses, even though it's prohibition, everybody's drinking. Move into the 30s. The 30s is very plain
Depressing.
That's
and
my 2009.
and boring. The clothes are really like normal, typical. There's not a huge amount of literature being published because people can't afford to buy books. They can't afford to go to the theater. They can't afford to
They all saw their money in the stock market.
just sit and listen to the radio like they used to. So all the arts kind of were in a real lull during the early 30s. Then something happened that rebooted the economy. What was that?
The end of Prohibition.
No.
That boosted the economy.
Yep.
World War II.
World War II started. I would say that event would be the bombing of Pearl Harbor when America jumped into the war. And how was that an economic boost?
Because it gave the people that went to war, they had jobs, and when they left, new jobs opened up.
Okay, so about 10% of the population left to go fight, people that had jobs. And so then a bunch of people who didn't have jobs could take that 10% of jobs. Plus, because of the war, people had a renewed energy. So during the early 30s, people were just really dissatisfied with their existence, right? Everything kind of just sucked. Once America has something to fight for and a cause to believe in, people's spirits are re-energized. Does that make sense? Yeah. So
There's lots of things.
we look at history as a series of ups and downs. You can stop it, Reese.